Coming up on Network Africa. Mali's military promises elections after ousting President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta. ECOWAS suspends Mali, shuts down borders and vows to impose sanctions over coup. Plus, Uganda's opposition leader, Kizza Besigye, bows out of upcoming presidential elections. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Shobowale. We begin today in Mali, where the new military rulers have promised a civilian political transition that will lead to a general election after a reasonable time. In a short televised statement on Wednesday morning, the soldiers who are now in charge of the country after a military coup on Tuesday said they were not interested in power, but in the health of the nation, but has intervened because of growing chaos, insecurity and anarchy. They've also ordered the closure of all border crossings and imposed a nighttime curfew. President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, whose second term in office had a further 3 years to run, announced his resignation at midnight, as well as the dissolution of the government and the National Assembly.
From disputed elections to the president's detention, Mali's President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta has resigned and dissolved parliament. The move came hours after mutinying soldiers detained him, along with Prime Minister Boubou Cissé and other top officials. Keïta announced his decision to step down in a brief address on national broadcaster ORTM at about midnight.
After weeks of turbulence of various demonstrations, it pleased some elements of our armed forces to conclude that it should end with their intervention. So I don't really have a choice, because I did not wish for blood to be spilled to keep me in office. This is why I wish right now, while thanking the people of Mali for joining me throughout these long years with warmth and affection, to announce my decision to retire from this moment, with all the consequences, the dissolution of the National Assembly and the government.
The news of Keïta's departure was met with jubilation by anti-government demonstrators, while leaders of the military coup, calling themselves the National Committee for the Salvation of the People, say they will enact a political transition and stage elections within a reasonable time.
In order to avoid the country from sinking, patriotic forces gathered at the National Committee for the People's Salvation have decided to take responsibility before the people and history to ensure the continuity of the state and public services. This heavy responsibility will only be achieved by the living forces of this nation. From August the 19th, 2020, all aerial and land borders will be closed until further notice. A curfew will be in place until further notice from 9 p.m. until 5 a.m. The continuity of public services will be ensured by those entitled with rules in effect. Civil society and political movements are invited to join us so we can create together the best conditions for a civilian political transition, leading to credible regional elections that ensure democracy through a roadmap that will lead to a new Mali.
The political upheavals unfold months after disputed legislative elections and came as support for Keïta tumbled amidst criticisms of his government's handling of a sprawling security situation in the north and central regions that has entangled regional and international governments, as well as the United Nations mission.
The situation in Mali has been condemned by Mali's regional and international partners, who fear Keïta's fall could further destabilize the former French colony and West Africa's entire Sahel region. Reacting to the situation in the country, the Economic Community of West African States has suspended all financial flows between its 14 other member states and Mali, and suspending Mali from its internal decision-making bodies. The bloc also says that its members would close land and air borders with Mali while pledging to demand sanctions against the mastermind of the coup. ECOWAS describes the action as having a negative impact on peace and stability in Mali and the sub-region as a whole. Meanwhile, a delegation of West African heads of state is expected in Mali. The president of Niger, Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire are also expected in the country. Heads of state from the Economic Community of West African States bloc had previously visited the country and proposed the formation of a unity government to resolve the political crisis. The opposition rejected the proposal and insisted that President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta must resign. We'll have more on the situation in Mali, but in the meantime, let's take a look at some other stories. Elsewhere in West Africa, the opposition in Burkina Faso has agreed to rally behind any challenger to President Roch Kabore, who reaches the second round in November's elections. 8 presidential candidates and 22 opposition parties signed the agreement, which states that should 2 opposition candidates reach the second round, then their respective parties would support them. The first round of the presidential election will be held on November 22nd. Well, Uganda's opposition leader, Kizza Besigye, has announced that he will not stand in the upcoming presidential election. He made the announcement while speaking to supporters at the Forum for Democratic Change offices in the capital, Kampala. Local media reported that the supporters took away the podium while demanding that he picks presidential nomination form. There had been uncertainty whether the opposition leader will vie for presidency. He has in the past challenged President Yoweri Museveni in 4 elections. Back to Mali now. The political upheaval unfolds months after disputed legislative elections and came as support for Keïta tumbled amid criticism of his government's handling of a spiraling security situation in the northern and central regions that's entangled regional and international government, as well as a United Nations mission. The downfall of Mali's Keïta, who was first elected in 2013 and returned to office 5 years later, closely mirrors that of his predecessor, Amadou Toumani Touré, who was forced out of the presidency in a coup in 2012 after a series of pushing military defeats. That time, the attacks were carried out by the ethnic Tuareg separatist rebels. Earlier, we spoke to President of the Association of Foreign Relations Practitioners of Nigeria and former High Commissioner to Algeria, Iran and Turkey, Ambassador Gani Lawal. He says the situation in Mali calls for urgent action by African leaders.
Major among reasons is insecurity. Once the general society perceive that the atmosphere is becoming insecure for them, one of the fallout of that is to turn to government and ask government to do the needful, because one of the primary functions of government is to ensure security of life and property. And any government who is not able to do that is not entitled to continue to remain in power. But it is not by removing that government through a military push or through violent means. It's by using the ballot box to tell that government to please go. To please go, you are the wrong person for this job. So it's as simple as that. So it is an unfortunate development, it's because it's taking Africa back again. We don't want a situation where Africa will be looked at as a continent where they cannot rule themselves, a continent invested with violence, war, insecurity. No. So, and this is a lesson for all African leaders.
To discuss further on the political situation in Mali, we're now being joined by Professor Bola Akinserewa, the Director General of the Bolitag Center for Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. Thank you so much for joining us, Professor Akinserewa.
Thank you.
So this isn't the first or the second coup in Mali. Are you surprised by the turn of events?
I'm not in any way surprised. for one simple reason. The society, the larger Malian society, had been asking for the resignation of President Keita, Abubakar Keita. They made it clear that he has become a burden and a major source of insecurity, which the earlier interlocutor rightly drew attention to. Now, there was no response. The ECOWAS leaders have been preaching the gospel, the sermon of non-change of government by use of force, without addressing the major complaints of the people of Mali. So by the time the ECOWAS leaders appear not to have satisfied the quest, the needs, the expectations of the people of Mali, they now decided now at the level of the military to find a solution to it to avoid further deterioration of the crisis. So I'm not surprised at all. And in this case, this is not a military coup, not to talk of being a military coup d'etat. The issue is simply that the military now looked at the sentiments of the people, the situational political lull there, and decided now to ask him to step down. They removed him, but now they have compelled the president to resign, which he didn't want to do before.
Yeah, Professor
I'm not
Quintero,
surprised.
yeah, I think it's interesting, some points you made there. We've seen episodes of people standing up to the government saying enough is enough in Africa. Over the past 2 years, we saw Algeria, we saw Sudan, where the military had to get involved. You know, what does this say about where power lies in Africa? And what are the likely implications of the military's actions for Africa, African nations, and the regional bloc that share borders with Mali?
Your question is of general application. It's more thought-provoking globally than at the level of Africa. You see, power has always belonged and will continue to belong to the people of the world, of the continent, of the country concerned. In this case, in Algeria, in fact, what is happening in Belarus? People are always protesting the moment they see now that their interest is no longer protected by the government elected. This is the issue. So the lesson for us in Africa, particularly in Nigeria, in a situation whereby you have a country, even when you take the United States as an illustration, President Donald Trump believes that all presidential powers belong to him as president, being elected. He doesn't believe that there can be any other supra-Donald Trump authority. He doesn't. So when you have people who are elected on the basis of universal suffrage, they always believe that, yes, they are now the new almighty God. They don't listen to the people. And that's why the people now go beyond democratic electoral provisions, are now demonstrating. So like in Nigeria, President Buhari, who has also been an interlocutor, a mediator in the Malian crisis, you learn the first lesson that the extent to which he can continue to close his eardrums to public complaints, this can be a good lesson for them. There's no one who is elected who cannot be removed by the people who elected them, either through the legal democratic processes or otherwise. That is why power will always continue to belong to the people anywhere in the world, not just in Africa, not just in Nigeria.
All right, then, Professor Bola Akinterewa, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and analysis with us on Network Africa.
Thank you for having me.
Still ahead on the program. On World Humanitarian Day 2020, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres pays tribute to aid workers and healthcare responders on the front line amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Thanks for staying with us. It's World Humanitarian Day, a day set aside to honor all humanitarians around the world. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says humanitarians, health workers and first responders are the unsung heroes of the COVID-19 response, often risking their own lives to save others. This is the 11th World Humanitarian Day designated by the UN General Assembly. It falls on the day of the attack on the UN compound in Baghdad on the 19th of August 2003, which claimed the lives of 22 people, including the Secretary General's Special Representatives for Iraq, Sergio Varela de Mello. According to the UN, since then, nearly 5,000 humanitarians have been killed, injured or abducted, and the 2010 to 2019 decade experienced a 117% increase in attacks compared to the 2000-2009 decade.
These real-life heroes are doing extraordinary things in extraordinary times to help women, men and children whose lives are upended by crisis. This year, humanitarian workers are stretched like never before. They are responding to the global crisis of COVID-19, and with it, the massive increase in humanitarian needs from the fallout of the pandemic. The loss of jobs, education, food, water and safety is pushing millions more to the brink. Movement restrictions to slow the spread of the virus have meant that communities, civil society and local organizations, as so often before, are the very first responders. This year we celebrate them. People who are often in need themselves, like refugees, helping host communities, local health workers who care for the sick and vaccinate children, and humanitarians who negotiate access in areas of conflict to bring food, water and medicine. They are the unsung heroes of the pandemic response, and they all too often risk their own lives to save the lives of others. Today, join me in renewing our appreciation and support for the brave humanitarian health workers and first responders who show solidarity and humanity in this time of unprecedented need.
Still on World Humanitarian Day here in Nigeria, the federal government says it's working on a policy for the protection of aid workers in the country. The Minister of Humanitarian Affairs says the safety of aid workers is a priority for the federal government, and the policy is being put together by the National Humanitarian Coordination Committee.
The latest killing of aid workers by Boko Haram insurgents is a reminder of the dangers faced by those helping people affected by the crisis. According to the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, at least 40 aid workers have died in the line of duty since the beginning of Boko Haram insurgency. 15 of them were killed in the last 12 months. This event marks the beginning of a 2020 World Humanitarian Day celebration. It provides an opportunity to highlight the plight of aid workers in the country.
The flagrant disregard of international humanitarian law has become such that humanitarians are removing the Red Crescent or the Red Crosses that mark health facilities, because these identifiers, they believe, makes them targets. Doctors, nurses, health facilities, ambulances and aid workers are increasingly at risk.
Given the security incidences and the threats that have occurred in the last few months, I call on the government to continue their commitment and support for humanitarian actions and efforts by ensuring the safety and security of all humanitarian workers in Nigeria.
The Minister of Humanitarian Affairs is co-chairing the National Humanitarian Coordination Committee, charged with the responsibility of addressing humanitarian issues in the country.
This committee is going to deliberate on all these issues of the humanitarian workers. Their protection, as I mentioned earlier, is of paramount priority and importance to us as a ministry and as a country generally. And we are also working on a policy framework that will outline or address all these issues of humanitarian workers, their safety and their protection.
Besides paying respect to the aid workers who lost their lives in the line of duty, the United Nations hopes that Nigeria can commit more resources to the protection of aid workers in the country.
South Africa has begun easing lockdown restrictions, with more businesses allowed to open their doors. The ban of alcohol and cigarette sales have been lifted to the delight of many. However, there are still some sectors like entertainment still restricted, and others like tourism, which are allowed but cannot operate to capacity owing to travel restrictions.
It has been an immensely difficult 5 months.
That's a fact many businesses and individuals in the country will readily agree with, added to the fact that South Africa already fell into a recession even before the first case of the coronavirus was detected within. Economic growth projections deteriorated after the government imposed one of the strictest lockdowns in the world that halted most business activities. Isam Klanga, an economist at Alexander Forbes, says there is still hope for the South African economy.
We need to boost business confidence. We need to boost consumer confidence. We need to do that by putting together a regulatory reform that encourages private investors to invest in the economy. We need to deal with corruption to give confidence to private investors that if they do partner with government in some of the big infrastructure spend that are required to boost growth and employment, their monies will be safe. So far, we don't see that happening. And we just need to move beyond the planning phase where we continue to debate economic policy options and start implementing those policies that we agree on. And there are a lot of those.
While the country moves to increase economic activity, the president stressed that some measures will remain in place to limit transmission and protect the country's health capacity. Event organizers feel they have been left out as large gatherings are still restricted, which include sporting and entertainment events.
We have not been heard in the way that we need to be heard. So I would say that part needs to be built on. And when it comes to the amount of numbers that are allowed in an event, for I would say 95% of our events industry, it's just not worthwhile opening or putting on an event with only 50 people.
Even if theaters open, even if there's a relief fund, and even if we say, yes, everything is good to go now, people are not wanting to go out because they are scared at the moment, because there are reports of the virus peaking in October, and we really do not know when the virus is going to decide to leave this earth or leave us alone. We have no idea.
Hopefully, with the removal of restrictions, responsible conduct on the part of the people will keep the COVID numbers going down. That way, those left out will be back in business in no time.
Well, we're all looking forward to that. And that's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Tenyola Shuboale. Bye for now.